Do you want to do the? Hang on.
We're going to keep this in, Chris, this time.
Let's keep it in because you've just given it big licks about how good you are with the music. You got one job.
It's because you started talking. Right. Anyway, let's go.
Welcome to the Bowlers Union, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here again with you and with my colleague Keith. He's had a tough morning.
Very tough morning. Very tough morning.
Which I think we can get into because I've travelled with you up and down motorways for obviously near enough my whole career. And you've had a variety of different cars. You've driven them aggressively, every car. And
wow.
I've always said I was a little bit concerned about some of your driving, and today you have made a child sick in the back of your car.
Right. No, not I have, but not as straightforward as that. Bit of a rush around this morning. End up taking my neighbour's kid with us to school, but I had to drop my missus off first. Probably a little bit behind schedule, so I had to drop my little girl off at nursery. On the way, it's a lot of country roads, Chris. There are quite a lot of country roads between Winchester and where I am.
Yep. And
I'd say, obviously, when you're in a bigger car, it can be a little bit wafty, can't it? You can get a bit seasick, can't you, if you're on country roads and it's a bit bouncy and moving around. Little did I know when I was driving that my son's little friend in the bike can get car sick. And safe to say, chundered all down my back seat, which is still yet to be cleared, as I've had a very busy morning of dropping kids off places and then training and then needing to go and get something to eat to go back to the ground to do a bike session. So I've not managed to sort that out yet. But, these things happen. And I would like to say I've not driven every car aggressively. Let's just point that out. I don't have any points on my license. I'm a very, I'm a dad now. We change.
I'm not copied. Don't worry.
But yeah, it wasn't the best start to the morning. So be good to sit down and talk to you about some things we like to talk about. A bit of bowling, a bit of cricket.
Well, before we do, did you say you haven't cleaned it up yet?
I haven't had the chance.
Get ready, people, for a 3-hour podcast. Just to I want that sick to really marinate in the car and get deep into it.
Yeah.
So what's our episode today? We're going to talk about movement, lateral movement.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, there's three ways of moving the ball in the air. Oh, there's one in the air and off the surface. Your normal conventional swing, ball moving about off the wicket, a bit of nip, and reverse swing. You definitely say over here, the conditions are made more for just swinging the ball naturally, aren't they?
Yeah. So I think this podcast, hopefully for any listeners, we will try and help you understand the different types of movement and how you can increase your ability to do them all. That's what we hope you get out of it. So should we start with seam? That seems like a logical place. Actually, no, let's not start with that. Would you trade all sideways movement if you could control up and down? So if you could make a ball bounce lower or bounce more, would you just give up all sideways movement?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, because I could bowl a ball that's probably back of a length and hit people on the toe. How do you defend that? Yeah.
There's a clip that's been doing the rounds. I think the county championship Instagram feed put it up, and it's of me bowling out Jamie Smith. This is a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's got quite a lot of views, and I read the comments because obviously I get them. Some of the chat is incredible. Like literally, it is. I've whacked it in not halfway down, but it's definitely back of a length, and the ball has literally rolled along the floor. And he's kind of as he should be. He's kind of on the crease, looking to ride it a bit, bowled him out. And all these people in the comments are literally talking about his technique and all this sort of stuff. When you're like, the poor guy, literally, it was genuinely 4th day pitch, hit a crack, roll on the floor, and everyone's talking about his technique and stuff like that. Brilliant. I'll see if you can find that one. But so go on then. Let's talk about Seam, because I know you're a huge fan. Kyle Abbott, previous podcast guest, huge fan of Seam. Luke Fletcher, huge fan of Seam. What's your thoughts?
I think it's maybe I'm coming from this point because I was someone who just swung it for so long that just learned obviously a new trick. So it's kind of entertaining that you're utilising a different way of bowling, a different mode of getting the ball to move around, that it becomes exciting again. So I just think it's really difficult for people to face. Once the ball pitches, you've already made your mind up as a batsman what line you're playing, and for it to not hit the bat or not hit where you want on the bat, I think it's quite frustrating. You don't feel as though you're getting any confidence, and that's where you gain the confidence as a bowler. That you're in with a chance, and it just makes you want to run in that little bit harder, try that bit harder at the crease, because the more you can put in the right ways, the more you're going to get out of the wicket.
No, absolutely, mate. The obvious pros or the really good reasons to seam the ball are, as you say, is the lateness of the movement. Like, it's off the pitch, so batsmen are already committed, which makes it extremely hard to play. And also the randomness. Like, I know you claim, you make some claims, don't you, that you know which way you're seaming the ball and stuff.
No.
But I'm kind of joking. But for the most part, there is this random element to it, which makes it totally unpredictable. You can potentially know that it will maybe nip in more than it will nip away, but even so, that randomness makes it extremely difficult for people, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know the majority of which way the ball's going to nip, if it is going to nip, but the odd time it does go the other way. And that's why I like it so much, is because it's never fully guaranteed on if it's going to nip for starters and if it's going to nip the right way that batters may be expecting it to. So it's almost like opening a Christmas present, being like, oh, I've got this, and then all of a sudden, I've got another toy in there. I can, like, it's just another, if it moves another way, it's like, yes, I'm in the batter's head even more, because they don't know what line to play now. Do they keep playing for that ball to go away, or do they play on the inside of it? It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And I think, obviously, when we had Dale Steyn on, I think it's easier for someone like him who bowled absolute rockets to just swing it, because I think when you're bowling that quick with swing, you're never comfortable as a batsman to just be like, yeah. So I think for us slower bowlers, I put you in my category, Chris, as there's only half a mile an hour in between it. That it is good to actually be able to swing it at times, but if you can get the ball to move off the wicket, it is almost like facing someone that's pretty quick, because the ball is doing something so late that it's not easy to face.
So through doing this podcast, but this is something I've kind of had in my head for a long time, is I think people think of themselves as an individual snowflake a bit too much, and actually you're individual, but you belong in a category. So, for example, someone of Dale Steyn's frame, I think it's important that he swings it, because he isn't as tall, for example, as a Kyle Abbott, and where he's skiddier, he will seam it on average less than someone who's taller and more into the surface. Yeah. So I think it's really important for bowlers to know, be honest with yourself and say, right, actually, I'm only 5'8", therefore I need to have high ball speed. I'm going to be skiddy, but I need to move the ball in the air. Whereas someone like yourself, you bowl from a very high position, I think, work really hard, you get in a great position, nice and tall. But someone like you are going to get more seam movement because of your trajectory into the surface.
Yes. Yeah.
I've kind of forgotten why I've mentioned that. I'm sure you'll be able to remind me. I've sort of gone around the houses.
I think you're right though. And that's the thing is, it's just, I think obviously it's great the ball nips, but then I think your lines become really important. Don't get me wrong, the batsman seeing the ball move is difficult off the wicket. But it's only really effective if you are looking to attack that off stump, sometimes middle stump. But if you're doing it from a channel, if you want to get better, you're going to face better batters. That channel ball, unless it's nipping back a foot, then it's never really threatening. So you need to keep your lines really tight and attack the stumps. When it's swinging, you're obviously trying to get the ball to move in the air. You can, as long as your angle's okay, you can almost attack towards off stump, but knowing that it's going to be shaping away, and you're almost getting the batsman to push at the ball and encouraging them to maybe drive at one which isn't quite there, or push at one defending which isn't quite there. But when it's nipping, I think you have to be really at off stump, hitting that deck really hard.
Like it. So we've mentioned a few pros there of seam, the lateness of the movement and the randomness. I want to also add that actually I think it's a far simpler way to bowl, because ultimately you're not worried or concerned about moving the ball in the air. Therefore, being accurate, in theory, like you've just said about bowling a line, in theory, it's far easier if you know the ball's not going to deviate in the air, and you basically just have to land it in an area. And that it's as simple as that. Some super bowlers that we know, but someone like Alan Richardson, who's obviously now a Worcester coach, was our bowling coach at Warwickshire, and I played with him at Middlesex. He would talk about how simple his game plan was. And you know, when if you swing the ball, it is more complicated. So that's another positive. But are there any negatives or cons around seam?
Well, just if the ball isn't seaming,
right? But that is one. You're right. If you only seam it, and on any given day, let's take a test series in Pakistan, like England have had a winter or so ago. They're not great seaming conditions, but if you don't have then other tools, you're potentially struggling. And actually, I think that's a lot of the argument that someone like, or the ECB or the England higher ups have around the Duke's ball, isn't it, versus the Kookaburra ball, is that in Test cricket the ball doesn't seam as much, and that a lot of county operators get by purely on excessive seam movement. But yeah, I don't know whether that's a good argument or not really. But you don't want to be in a position where you can only seam a ball when it doesn't seam, because if that's the case, you need to have a lot of other stuff behind you.
I mean, that sounds like a discussion we used to have. We've had recently, well, not recently, previously before. It might have been early on. I think when Pop Welch was on, about if it needs the ball nipping away or nipping, don't pick you. You said don't pick yourself because you swing it. But now you're kind of saying you do need an element of both, don't you? You need something else. You can't just be a one-trick pony, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean that's hopefully what we're going to offer here, is that there's no reason why you can't do all of these, or get all these types of movement, but you have to kind of know where you sit with it. So I'd say I'm probably more of a natural swing bowler than a seam bowler, and that's possibly because, as we've talked about, I'm maybe a bit skiddier, whereas someone like yourself, you get a bit taller, more into the surface, so you probably get more seam. There's no rights or wrongs, but understanding yourself as a bowler, I think, is the key bit of it. It's no good being stubborn, is it, and not accepting who and what you are.
No, I do think, obviously, let's say a con, like we just said there, is the ball not moving. If you actually can't then move the ball in the air, you are really limited in what you can do. The only thing I would suggest at that point is, okay, the ball is pretty much going straight on, but then you have to find a way to be effective without the ball doing much. That's when it then becomes using your crease, just different lines approaching the stumps. Like, how can you hit the crease, different angles at the crease to actually hit off stump? So you're always trying to bowl off stump or fourth stump, but you might do it wide for a few hours. You might do it wide for two balls, then come closer. That then becomes limited, but another way of trying to be effective, where you're actually asking the batsman to face you from a different spot at the crease.
No, dead right. That's spot on. I'm glad you said that because I've completely forgotten about that in terms of this conversation. All right then. So, in terms of seam, what can we offer any listeners about how they can improve their ability to seam the ball? Is there anything that you focus on, or any cues that you
Well,
think are really good?
everyone's different. I learned from an old friend of ours, Richard Jones, who's Worcester assistant, um, where it was almost I still hold the ball for an in swinger to a right hander, but I split the seam. So normally when I'm swinging the ball, I will hold both fingers down the seam.
Mhm.
I counter the ball in a little bit more, split my fingers, and almost not trying to bowl an away swinger, but really open my palm and try and stay as tall as possible and really flick down. And I almost push myself out a little bit to get my shoulder taller, and then just really try and rip down the front of it. Down the back of it.
Mhm.
And over the period of time and looking at recordings of release, the ball started to wobble, and it wobbles in my own way. It doesn't wobble like you see a Jimmy Anderson, which is remarkable. It is a bit more scattered, but it does the job. Where it seems to nick majority away from the right hander, and the odd time in if it is wobbly.
So here we go. Right, and again, this has just come to me, so I apologise if I put you on the spot terribly here. Is seaming the ball? Does it have to be put? Is it wobble seam? Is it what? Because back in the day, before people were kind of aware of the whole wobble seam and perhaps cantering the seam slightly and doing what you've just said, didn't people used to just run in and try and hit the rope as hard as they could?
Yeah, but
Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? Or are we talking about wobble seam?
Well, I think back then the one I forgot me.
Sorry, have I done you?
No. The reason why I'm laughing is because me, you, and Ollie Hannon-Dolby, there was a clip he showed us of an old bowler talking
Fred
about
Truman. Fred Truman.
bricks and pebbles in wickets. Now,
Yeah.
and that's what it meant. There was meant to be like bits of stones in the wicket. So if you hit a stone in a wicket, I'm sure it's going to move no matter how that ball comes down the wicket.
Yeah.
It could be crossing. I do think it is more like there is more to it now. You're not going to get a few cobbles in a wicket, are you?
Oh, that'd be good, wouldn't it? How good would that be if it was like a little pebbly pitch and you just steamed in?
So I would say it's really important now of how that seam comes out. Obviously, I do it that way. I'm pretty sure when I remember speaking to Chris Welks about it, he may have been the opposite, where he holds it the seam as though it's almost an away swinger, slightly towards like down leg to a right if he was bowling to a right hander, but he looks to maybe hook round it a little bit more. So he might be staying like it's almost an away swinger, but still opening his palm up.
He grips it the same way I would grip it for a wobble seam, but he's a bit of a freak. So I remember talking to him about it, being like, you know what I mean? Because I remember he would get the ball to nip away quite a lot with his wobble seam. Something I've always found quite tricky, away from right hand. I'm talking.
And that's when he's trying to wobble it, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
So I thought.
And so, right, hear me out.
Mhm.
When I obviously hold it the other way to get it to nip away from a right hander.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I hold it for an in. I hold the seam like it's an in swinger, but canter my wrist to be a bit more open and almost pushing it away, like an away swinger, but I stay tall on it and pull down. I was with Alfonso Thomas, just wanting to see if I could do it to get the ball to nip the other way more often. So I just flipped it the other way around. So I held the seam like Welksy would, where the actual seam is pointing away for a right-hander, but trying to hook round it a little bit as though I'm bowling an in-swinger. And eventually it started to go the opposite way every few balls. So I think there is something with that. I do really think there is. I don't know what to do with release and how the ball comes out, but there is definitely something with that. Then you've got the other side of it where ball pressure, when you're pushing off your fingers, which I find amazing that some people can do that. I've not got the ability to do that, where they will push more off one finger than the other, and that gets the ball to just more like kind of wobble a little bit more in the air and get the ball to nip off a little bit.
So that's I mean, this is God. You could go off here. And our plan was 10 minutes if per section.
Mhm.
Finger pressure is really niche. I think for the most. Some people will love it, and for some people, it will be too focused to
Yeah,
think about. So I'd fit into that category. People talking about finger pressure, I'm a bit like not
yeah,
interested, pal. Like tell someone else. So for example, you get the people who love the finger pressure side of stuff. I'm more basic and generic. I think my most important is the feeling of actually. I think a basic one, feeling like you're hitting the deck and you're bowling into the surface because the seam
Mhm.
has to grip into something to
yeah,
move. Whereas
yeah,
if you're skiddy and along the surface, you make your chances of seeing the ball a lot harder. So for me, that's like a basic but really obvious one. And actually, hit the deck is literally the best cue in the world for as a bowler. I swear,
yeah,
like it doesn't get better than that. It gets you in the battle. It gets you bowling as hard as you can, and it increases the chances of moving it and stuff. You mentioned I should have brought a ball here to show through the camera for those watching on YouTube. So I'm amazed now the amount of people who I see with quite a wide grip. So talking about seam, for me, the wider you go, the more of a wobble you're going to get. I
yeah.
definitely think fingers tight on the seam, you get a cleaner release,
Mhm.
which you might come onto in the swing section. But if you want to wobble it, I actually think you don't necessarily have to do too much, but a bit more of a spread. You get a bit of an untidier seam where it starts doing a bit.
Yeah,
They would be my big tips. But in terms of training, get a mate to stand on a chair where the umpire is, and like you've touched on. Feel like
yeah,
all the releases and seam positions are kind of unique in that sense, and actually video the release with your iPhone, zoom in on slow mo, and you can see because you do want to have a. Well, we could go into big wobble versus a small wobble. But assume you're playing in England, a small wobble is more than enough, isn't it?
yeah.
And you can see where that seam is, and it should be going from what I don't know, 11 to 1, or maybe
Pretty
10 to 2 within that parameter,
Yeah, yeah,
something like that. But you can do it quite well on video. To be honest, I'm sure you've done something similar.
yeah. And that's also last thing with that is it's not always going to work the same kind of grip and the same type of wobble does not always mean it's going to move. There's been times when I've had to be a bit more aggressive with my wobble where it is that 10 to 2 kind of really going
Mm.
to extract something out the wicket. And then there's been times when I've been doing that in another game and it's not going anywhere. And then I've actually decreased it and it's like 10 to 5 to 1. And that is actually getting something out of the wicket. So you've got to try these different things and see what works for you and almost try and figure out both because there are probably going to be times when you need to adjust that wobble where it's not as aggressive or it needs to be more.
Well, I think the typical thing that I've heard and believe in is the more crumbly or drier the surface, potentially might need a bigger wobble. But that's to decide on the day, isn't it? And on in the conditions and stuff. Before we move on from seam, I will ask you one good question.
Yeah.
Seam is random, correct?
Yes, for most, yes.
What if it randomly does nothing? I'll leave that with you for the listeners because you have to
I don't
factor that
mind
in,
that.
right?
I don't mind that.
Yeah, but it's something that has to be factored in. You could be
Yeah.
doing everything right, and it could go absolutely. You could be all in with aces and still lose. You could be getting everything right here, and it could randomly do nothing, and you could think, "Oh, I am bowling absolute gun barrel today." Um,
But that's when you kind of go, if that's the case, I've got to use my angles. But with that, it's not always a bad thing because I don't expect the ball to move every time I bowl a wobble. I'm happy for it to just kind of, as long as my line and length's good, that's what I'm looking at trying to do. Where I am challenging the batsman anyway. And if it doesn't move, it doesn't move. It's not the end of the world.
so today's episode is brought to you by Gray Nichols.
Now, I'm going to go on about Gray Nichols a lot over these future episodes. Everyone needs it. And there's so many people in my dressing room use different kit, and I don't know why. When not too far away, you can have the best kit around, which is Gray Nichols by a long shot. A lot of overseas come over. I always see them using grey nickels. It's the best kit out there. I don't need to say anything else. Have a look online or order a catalogue, look through it, get your order, and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, so if you go on greynickels.co.uk, you can use our unique code and get yourself a 20% discount. For those watching, it's across the bottom. For those listening, the code is A_TBUP20, and that's all capitalized. So yeah, get over to greynickels.co.uk and get yourself some kit. Right. Keith, we've decided we're going to pivot a bit this episode because we've got so into talking about seam. We are going to focus on that rather than talking about swing and reverse swing, which we will now save for a future episode, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Can you remember where we were though before we did the advert? Because I kind of got all excited about seam and then
Yeah.
forgot.
Well, we need to do the advert. Well, I can't, but I want to ask you a question. Do you feel that, because I know how you bowl to lefties,
Yeah.
I won't reveal it, but do you feel as though you get the ball to nip when you want it to, or do you feel as though you just bowl in a line when you're bowling to left-handers?
Okay. Yeah. No, I feel like I get.
I faced you, so I know what happens. I know what happens when you've done it. From over the wicket, we're talking about here, by the way.
Oh, wait. Are we talking red ball or are we talking in the
Red ball.
final?
And you look at it.
Let's pivot again and talk about the cup final.
Red ball over the wicket to left-handers. Do you? I know you look to run it across.
Yeah, I don't think there's any secret here now. So essentially, through years of trying and not being as good as I wanted to be, swinging it back into lefties is harder because it is just getting you have a smaller margin of error, I think, especially against good left-handed batters. I think I get the ball to nip and feel like it goes across. Although I don't try and focus on that, I try and focus on bowling a line, and then if it nips, it nips. But I think I get the ball to predominantly nip away. Keith, what are you laughing at?
Yeah, you definitely do. So there is just enough, and I'm surprised. Obviously, we're quite open. We always have been about our bowling and stuff. I'm surprised you've waited so long to use it more against right-handers because it's a massive setup for you. I think that you can have more batters. I know one batter in particular that hates facing you, and I'm always watching for when you bowl against. I think you know what I'm on about.
I know you're on about.
When you're bowling against him, that he's waiting for that one to nip back, and he has struggled at times. I think he did pretty well against you lot one time, but yeah, I think you should be bowling it a bit more often, to be honest. That nip back.
Yeah, it's really, you know what? I'll be honest. I can be totally honest. Actually, there's no point not being honest. It's not always easy managing a career with the skill development. Is that fair? Because at some point you have to try out your new skill in a pressurized situation.
Yeah.
And that's not always an easy thing to do. And I'm talking about it, luckily, from a professional standpoint. But that could be someone going from second team cricket to first team cricket, playing Birmingham Prem, and being like, "Oh, I'm playing against Keith Barker, who's batting for Moseley today. I don't know if I feel confident that I can swing it back into him or whatever." So there's always that point where you're like, "I've practiced it. I've now got to do it when it matters." And I'm going to be a bit arrogant here, but what held me back from it was like, do I need to? Because my stop ball is so good, the away swinger. I'm like, do I need to try and nip it back loads against right-handers? I'm like, I could just, I'm pretty dialed in with my away swinger, and we often preach, don't we? Keep it simple, keep it simple. So I had that internal dialogue. Should I just be keeping it simple with my stop ball, or should I be throwing a few more innies in there?
So I think with yourself, obviously, we're talking when you were a little bit quicker than what you are now. Don't bend your back now, do you, mate? On a serious note, I think because of how quick you were bowling, it's not the same pace. But like we said about Dale Steyn, he only needed to do that because of how quick it was. You were able to go bowl that extra 2 yards of pace. That it was enough on its own. But still, I'm looking now and thinking, how many extra wickets could you have had
Oh,
if
mate.
you'd have been able to just do that from fourth stump? So many LBs or bowled, it'd been ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're totally right. You're right on everything there. And that's what I would throw out there to people is if you're quick, and by quick, I'm talking 85 and above. If you can bowl that speed, you can do unbelievably well by doing one delivery and a bumper. I stand by that 100%. I think we even joked on that Dale Steyn podcast about that. It can be that simple. As you drop a bit in speed, you need to be more skillful and arguably more accurate. 100%. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, I probably could have got a lot more, a lot more wickets. You're
Well,
bumming me out now, Keith.
do you know what? Another one I want to agree with you. Definitely, I'm very aware of where I was when I was coming into that Warwickshire team. That you start off as well when you get into the first team. You are that fourth seamer in the squad, and you bowl with the ball when it's not new. You then come and bowl when the new ball, just before the new ball comes, and then your big bowlers get the ball and they do whatever, and you kind of just used as a ball's not doing anything. Big lads are tired. Fill this gap. I was definitely that for the first few years of I was a swing bowler and I need the ball to move in the air. I could only swing it predominantly into right-handers with the odd time swinging it away. And I knew that I needed to develop a new skill. And it got to a stage where I'd learnt wobble, but I never knew when to use it. And the time when I did is because I had no choice. It was against Worcester, against Moeen Ali, and the ball wasn't swinging. It looked a bit of a tire ball, and I thought, well, I might as well try it because I'm not being effective just bowling gun barrel straight. I might as well try and get the ball to do something. Lo and behold, after 3 or 4 balls of trying it, it started to move a little bit, and there was the odd play and miss. And I was like, well, actually, all of a sudden now, I am more effective, even when the ball is not doing as much in the air. I can now do this and be quite consistent. Then it becomes about the type of wickets, the batsman over round, but it is a bit of a leap of faith of I'm probably going to have to try this in this game situation. If I don't give it a go, when am I going to actually step up and get better? I need to put myself in that situation and try it, give it a go, or else I will never know if that skill is good enough to compete at that level.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I guess that's being brave, isn't it? Because you don't ever know. Here you go then. So, what advice would you give to someone in that situation? Because one thing I would say is having a bit of an attitude where I don't say don't care, but the good thing about wobble seam, or in your scenario when you say right, I'm going to bowl wobble seam here at Mo Ali, I'm not going to try and be fancy and swing the ball everywhere. What is good about that is it is relatively simple, and all you have to do, because you hope the variability and the randomness works in your favour, but all you have to concentrate on then is right, I'm just hammering off stump, and whatever
Yeah.
happens, happens, which is a great place to be.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier with it being trying to get the ball to move off the deck than trying to get, if you're not someone who swings the ball, it's not as easy to go, right, I'm just going to start swinging it now. Because if you are, you've probably got a new ball and you need to set the tone. But when it's not, when you're a swing bowler and you're trying to learn wobble and when's the right time to use it, it could be a case that you're on at the end where you're against the breeze. Like you could be trying to swing it away from a right-hander, but the breeze is gale force. You're trying to swing the ball into it. As Mo Abbas would go, well, why fight against the breeze? You know what I mean?
Mm.
I might have to try it. I'm actually going to just try and bowl at the stumps, take the trying to swing it and get your line right. Don't have to consider how much the wind's going across. If I just bowl at the stumps, hitting the deck hard, and try and hold the ball the way I've been working on, try and hit the top of the stumps as hard as I can from as tall as I can. If you can execute that and you set a field for a bit of protection with that, you've got the best chance of being able to bowl that ball and hoping that something happens. If you just kind of go for it, if the conditions aren't right for you or whatever, if it's not the right plan for that batsman, then you can lose confidence and then not want to do it again.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know what this makes me want to do? It makes me want to talk to an Australian bowler, someone who's performed in Australia, and what their advice would be on seam versus swing in their conditions. Because certainly Stain and Abbott both suggested that the ball nips quite a lot off South African surfaces, didn't they?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
And here,
Yeah, and here exactly. So can we talk about for club players? Let's talk any level of club cricket. How do you think seam bowling fits into their game? Is this something that every club bowler should do? Should club bowlers be looking to focus purely on seam over swing, do you think?
I think so, mate, to be honest with you. Reason being is the wickets aren't going to be the same level as what they're going to get county level. And even county level, the wickets nip. Club level, I'm sure, and I've played enough cricket to see and watch the ball nip around. And interestingly, the biggest league legends I've come across are always the ones that keep her up 65 mile an hour on a length, but get the ball to move. They're the most testing, rather than someone that's just running in trying to steam in. They seem to be the most effective. So I would be club level trying to, if you think your ceiling is club cricket and you don't feel that you can go anymore, I would be going, well, you know what, I'm just going to learn to wobble it on a good length and let the ball do the rest.
I don't want to undersell the skill of seam or wobble seam, but again, if you're a club player, and that's like you say, that's the level you're at, and you want to just maximize your stats and your bowling prowess in club cricket, but you only train on a Thursday and potentially you do a Tuesday as well, so you play on the Saturday. That isn't enough training volume, I don't think, to be a good swing bowler. So think about the hours that you put in honing the art of swing, right? Because you have so much information to factor in to being accurate and swinging it. That is not the same with seam. With seam, all you do is nail your line, hit the deck, and sure, pay a little bit of attention on your training nights about how the seam's coming out. But beyond that, it's probably a quicker learning process than the learning process of swing.
Yeah.
Which leans into someone who isn't a professional and training multiple times per week. Is that fair?
No, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. And there's one more thing, probably more towards the county stuff, but
yeah, go on.
Toward wicket, club level. Your bounces used to be cross seam. I don't know if they still are, but we found why they were effective.
Yep.
Wobble seam bouncers. If you get a wobble seam bouncer, they are super effective, I think, because they do move, and batters sometimes want to get out of the way of them, and it can follow them, and it's just uncomfortable in my eyes. I've tried it a few times, and it can be quite lethal because as a batsman thinks, oh, I'm going to just get out of the way of it, and they sway the wrong way. It's uncomfortable, and that then gives you more room for bowling your wobble on a good length.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely, and the process, or not the process, the logic is the same with wobble seam potentially. Let's go cross seam bouncer, for example. You either hit the seam, which will make the ball bounce a little more, or you'll hit the leather and it will skid more. Well, that logic applies to wobble seam in that you'll either hit leather, in which case it should go through nicely, but if you clip the seam, you're likely to get nipped back at the helmet of the batter, which is where you should probably be aiming. Yeah. And again, all these, again, it's a good example of the randomness and that variability that batsmen don't like, that plays in your favour when you start doing that. For sure. Is there anything else that jumps out at you that we've missed talking about here? I just want to make sure any listeners get the absolute bang for their buck with this episode.
Really, I'd say once you've learnt that skill of getting the ball to move, is then don't just be happy with that. Use your crease, learn to come around the wicket, learn to be wide of the crease when you're over, learn to be tight, because it's going to work differently for different batters, and you will pick up cues where you understand actually this batsman picks up quite bottom-handed, like Chris, hits quite square in the ring.
Not anymore.
Where you might go, well, I need to be actually at them from wide of the stumps to really cramp them up and get that ball to move, rather than being wicket to wicket, knowing that if you stray fourth stump and the ball just moving away because of how tight you've gone, that then can become a cut ball if a batsman's good on that, if you know what I mean.
Yes, actually, okay. So this has led into another chat. How are you doing for time, Keith? Because I know you've got to go and you've got to do school. Okay, so
1 second. 1 second.
There's a bowler I love. He used to get me out all the time. All the time. It was a joke. I don't know if you know who it is.
All the time?
Yeah,
No.
it was it's like Graham Onions, right?
Right.
So I put him in the camp as a guy who's a really brilliant seam bowler. Now so if you're a nipper and you nip it, I like the fact that he was really tight to the stumps. Is that a good default position, do you think, for someone who nips it? So you're almost always in that channel? Because you just mentioned about being more mid-crease. Would you be, as a default, more mid-crease, or would you be tighter and then use coming wide as a variation?
Well, it depends. I said more like mid to wide if the batsman's someone that picks the bat up quite bottom-handed, quite square. If it's someone that's straighter, picks the bat up straighter, you might want to come a little bit more tighter to the stumps, because full face, nipping either way, either an edge. I think if it was me, from facing Onions and knowing what he was about, I do think it's harder for a batsman to face if they are mid to tight towards the stumps. It just seems relentless.
Yeah. You feel like if you miss the ball, you're just out.
Yeah.
Basically. which isn't ideal, is it? Yeah, I miss more than my fair share. Also, just a quick one before you go. You accuse me of being bottom-handed and stuff as a batter. How are you getting away with making these allegations when you are a bottom-hand shoveler as well?
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it, though. It doesn't look like it with me.
Doesn't it?
With you, definitely. Think you may have changed. Leicester might have sorted you out, but I do remember Durham away where me and Chops had a little bet with you that you couldn't hit through the offside, and that bottom hand was just clawing, trying to whip round through, and you kept playing and missing. So
yeah, that was a long time ago. I have to give credit to the coaches at Leicester actually for helping me and put that time in, because actually when I was at Warwickshire, we were barking up the wrong tree with it. And it wasn't so much my bottom hand; it was more the top one. But this is not a batting podcast. Batters suck. So let's move away. Let's move away from that. So I just want to recap then and pull me up if any of this is wrong. All right. So the advantages and the real pros of nipping the ball and seaming it are that it happens so late, batters can't adjust, and to a large degree it's random. And if you don't know, the batter doesn't know, which makes it really hard to face.
Yeah.
In terms of being a better seam bowler, focusing on hitting the deck and being from a tall position, you talked about.
Yeah.
Focusing on bowling a really hard, good line. And then what else did you say in terms of grips? Were you an advocate of fiddling with your grips?
Yeah, fiddle with your grips. See what works. You've got to practice this thing. A lot of people have got to realise they've got to put the time in. So, like you say, Tuesday and Thursday for club cricketers, as an example, from start of that session to the end, both sessions, you want to be working on it. If someone can record you, brilliant. And just see what works for you. Everyone is different. You might be a bowler that actually is more about finger pressure, and you might end up flicking off your middle finger a little bit more. You don't know, but you've got to give it a go. You've got to try it out and see what happens.
What do you think about kids? Because you know what, I'll throw it out there for any young lad bowling. I'd say try and swing it for the reason that you can always learn seam. So, like I'd say, if you're a young bowler, bowl rapid and keep your wrist behind the ball and try and shape it.
Yeah,
because it's
for me personally, I think it's difficult enough as a kid to learn how to bowl just a good area. I'll be just trying to get the wrist behind it, and if we can get a bit of shape, keep them tall, look after that back and the body, stay tall on it, and try and just see. I think that naturally kind of sorts the seam position out a lot of the time. Is actually head towards a target, going forward, arm nice and tall. The wrist ends up being in a decent position. If it's not, you're talking minimal adjustments to get that ball to move. But me personally, I would just be focusing on getting them in a strong position. It's almost that building block to become a very good bowler. Is you want the technique, the alignment, hitting a good area, and then we look at swinging it, getting the wrist right, and then as that becomes ingrained as that's normal for them, let's now tinker and look at a bit of wobble and try and get the ball to move.
Love it. That sounds like something that we should draw up. And
oh, my 5-year-old's on that program. He has no idea about it, mate.
Love it. What, build the athlete first, get all those qualities in, or?
Yeah, he just needs to toughen up. He's a bit soft.
It's like his dad. Right. Do you want to do the outro, or do you want to leave it with me? Because you constantly
You do it. You do it. Just get it right.
I feel like you got the intro a bit wrong. So this is like a free hit, a free roll.
One really good thing about me is when you are doing the outro, I never start talking.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? No, you knew. You knew. This is a good podcast. We've known each other for so long. You knew I was going to try and catch you out. Right. Anyway, viewers and listeners, take it easy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.